friends and students, thank you very much. I've got my colleagues, ministers here, and I understand ASEAN ambassadors also here, and I think more importantly, students, where I see. I was invited 10 years ago, as Prime Minister in waiting. You understand why I refused to accept the invitation. Because I've been in waiting with, I'm one of the longest in waiting Prime Ministers in the world. So it's always a pleasure to be associated with the London School of Economics. As you know, it is an institution that's educated a great number of esteemed Malaysians. They were more progressive and left when they were here. Most of them have joined the system. With the exception probably of Professor Syed Hussain Ali, who happens to be my professor of sociology, who remained left under Lasky till the end. And the rest are all becoming followers of Adam Smith. No, not serious. But it's quite true. Now, Prof, ladies and gentlemen, the international order today is in a tremendous flux, where an assortment of pressure points, disruptive events, and evolving transboundary challenges are negatively impacting efforts on global governance and multilateral cooperation. Existing rules and norms are being questioned and challenged. Some are unquestionably unjust, blatantly abused by the powerful, and thus are deeply in need of reform towards a more inclusive and just order. Others, however, underpin the very system of peace, prosperity, and cooperation that many of us in the global community hold dear and should be strengthened where necessary, defended where it must, and applied fairly without exception. These changes have had social impacts across our respective countries and communities, leading to the rise of populist politics. Once merely a fringe of discourse, it now occupies the center stage, and the corridors of power from North America to Europe, here in the United Kingdom, in Latin America, and even back home in Asia. To complicate matters, we are sometimes caught in a trap sprung from the alluring and persuasive power of the era of post-truth politics, where anyone today can fabricate content in order to generate news, and where such news may sometimes be taken as true even when it is fake. Welcome to the post-truth era, where lies are not only tolerated but sometimes embraced as the holy writ. The question therefore is, can democracy really function when such a state of being engenders the state of being, engenders the politics of exclusion, division, dispossession, and hate, which then cross the rhetoric to policies? The world is changing, and many struggle to grasp its implications and their place in the emerging scheme of things. Instead of reassuring electorates and better preparing them for the future, we sometimes elected to weaponize fear and uncertainty, sow the seeds of suspicion and animosity, and to victimize the other, to refer to the often-quoted view of Edward Said on Orientalism, or for that matter Martin Kramer. This goes against the very ethos of LSE's Fabian founders, who advocated progressive ideas of social democracy and social justice and what it takes to have a good society. We are then stirred from our own long dogmatic slumber, not by the exhortations of David Hume, on abandoning dogmas, but a timely and I would say more practical reminder of John Rawls' enduring question on what principles of justice should prevail in order to attain to a good society that is a society that is fair and egalitarian. From the point of governance, I would venture to say that the attainment of such a society must stem from the expanding of the national wealth, public funds, towards the growth of human capital, chiefly through education, housing, and health care. Additionally, poverty eradication and the creation of humane living and working conditions shall remain paramount. I want to refer to the assessment evaluation by the alumni. He's just going to present to me, but with my intelligence outfit, I've had a copy and perused through, and thank you, you were extremely critical of the system, expenditure not adequate for the primary education, and the need to retrain and upskill our teachers. Thank you for the remarks. Don't charge the Ministry of Education for that. No, but this is what I mean by having a reasoned discourse, democratic accountability. Democracy is not about elections, about having leaders to have the preparedness, to be prepared to listen and evaluate and take criticisms. And once you get this exposure and training at institutions like LSE, it is your duty, therefore, to come back and contribute. We are the team of reform. We listen, and I can assure you that some of these ideas will be incorporated and be taken into account by the Ministry of Education. If it's not done, then we may have to then introduce a new Minister of Education. Now the creation, no, don't take it seriously. It will be sleepless nights for the minister. The creation of wealth of nations should not be a license for unbridled capitalism. Inasmuch as the principles of political economy cannot be subjected to the dictates of short-term gains, let alone political expediency. On the contrary, rather than playing to the gallery of populist demand, the imperative of responsible governance enjoins us to formulate policies and take decisive actions for the greater good, namely sustainable economic growth and shared prosperity. Oh, well said and done. We all want to emerge as great statesmen. We remember the Churchillian edict. Great statesmen think of the next generation and lose the next elections. A politician, of course, talks in terms of populist policies that would ensure that they win the next elections. So how do you then navigate to ensure that you remain true to the principles and ideas, which means emerging as true statesmen, but at the same time understand the demand and dictates of our times, the concerns of the citizens. So I don't want to claim to be a good statesman. I think there must be some. This is where LSE should share some of the notes with me, how to then navigate this. Now, the reality is that we are also in an era of profound uncertainty, one that is shaped by the will of great powers. The United States-China competition has redefined economies, technologies, and alliances across the globe. But it is most keenly felt in the Asia-Pacific, including ASEAN, the world's largest and fastest developing region. This rivalry not only intersects with the aspirations of our region, but also challenges the peace and stability that underpins this drive for growth and prosperity. Economic interdependence, once seen as a cornerstone of global peace and prosperity, now appears fragile It is only becoming a source of tension, but could also turn into an Achilles' heel for many economies that have flourished under globalization. Trade wars, tariffs, sanctions have become regular instruments. The new mantra, but it becomes instruments of strategic rivalry, eroding the spirit of cooperation and fostering dangerous mindset of suspicion and distrust. Nations are no longer just competitors in the marketplace. They are adversaries in a global contest for influence and dominance. For smaller states like Malaysia and our neighbors in Southeast Asia, the implications are inescapable. The shifting dynamics of international relations, the erosion of multilateral cooperation, and the growing sense of distrust are dangerously becoming the new normal. The challenge for us in Malaysia, for example, is not merely to endure, but to thrive. We find ourselves compelled to navigate these disruptions with clarity of purpose. The likelihood of a multipolar world means that centers of global influence will not just be China and the United States or Japan or the European Union. Instead, count on the emerging players like South Korea, India, the GCC countries, Turkey, Brazil, South Africa, and don't ignore the potential of ASEAN, which you represent. Consider the immense aspirations and cumulative heft of Southeast Asia. ASEAN, a region of over 690 million people, making it the third largest population in the world with a nominal GDP of $3.8 trillion, the fifth largest economy in the world and the third largest in Asia. In the same vein, there is a resurgence of Global South as driver of global prosperity. By 2030, it is projected that 3 of the 4 largest economies will be from the Global South. It is also about the reclaiming of a voice that can no longer be ignored in the emerging international order. The empowerment of Global South narratives and the desire for greater participation in the international system and on policies that decide on governance of the global commons on more equitable terms should not be dismissed or diminished. Now, students, ladies and gentlemen, you see my priority is right. Students, ladies and gentlemen. Just as the extensive literacy campaigns in the first half of the 20th century transformed the Arab Gulf nations, the legal, economic, cultural, and communal transformations that they have been spearheading these 2 decades is set to breathe a new life into the societies and economies of the GCC. Malaysia and ASEAN, welcome. And roots for the continued prosperity of our brethren in the Middle East, Africa, Latin America. These seminal changes, especially in Asia, are unacknowledged by some in the global community. I believe there's a degree of hubris and hypocrisy that seems unwilling to recognize, accommodate, and adapt to these seismic shifts. Another source of resentment is the double standards when defining human rights, rules, and norms. When college and university students the world over stood united in protest against Israel's violent occupation and colonial project of Palestine, some governments responded with harsh reprisals. And these are not dictatorship or autocracies, but supposedly the shining examples of freedom democracy. Take note that LSE is an exception. While I welcome the news of the upcoming ceasefire in Gaza and commend the efforts of Egypt, Qatar, and the United States in compelling all parties all involved, the international community must ensure that it is upheld, paving the way for talks on subsequent phases that will lead to sustainable calm, the provision of aid, and the reconstruction of Gaza. Indeed, this is the most immediate priority. Justice and accountability remain critical, as is the need for a viable, sovereign, and independent Palestinian state and just and lasting peace. We also need to go to the fundamental and profound imperative of transcending differences and disagreements so as to appreciate better our commonalities, shared values, and traditions. Indeed, our basic humanity beseech us to protect human life and well-being inasmuch as human rights, including the right to life, are universal and inherent to all. The best position Malaysia, for Malaysia, amid the uncertain ebbs and flows of the strategic tides, must be adaptive, resilient, principled, and above all, clear-sighted. We must know not only what we want, but what we are or who we are as a nation. This is imperative as we occupy a critical position in global supply chains as well as maritime trade routes. Now, firstly, Malaysia will remain dedicated to fostering shared growth, bolstering regional cooperation, particularly ASEAN, and maintaining our openness to trade, development, and commerce. And as chair of ASEAN in this year, Malaysia will seek to rejuvenate key mechanisms like the ASEAN +3 and the East Asia Summit. Both have been celebrated for their convening power but remain underutilized. The East Asia Summit is the only regional forum dedicated to strategic and security issues in our region that is led by leaders and where rival powers meet in a neutral setting. Instead of getting bogged down by the disputes of major powers, we would rather work with the like-minded member states and dialogue partners to seek ways on how such mechanisms can deliver on its aspirations. Secondly, Malaysia will continue its open and pragmatic approach in engaging both the United States and China, whose relations are anchored in mutual respect and shared interests. In spite of all the talk that Malaysia is pervading towards China, the fact is that the United States continue to reign supreme, cumulatively as the largest source of foreign direct investment. In Malaysia, especially in the tech sector, China, on the other hand, has been our largest trading partner since 2009, marking 16 years of thriving trade relations. It is as clear as day, and there is no zero-sum game here. Maintaining robust ties with both the United States and China is not merely a matter of economic pragmatism, but a strategic imperative to safeguard our national interests in an increasing volatile world. This is what we mean by cultivating engagement with both to ensure the region's diversified economic base, reduce interdependence, and a strengthened position as a resilient, open, and competitive economy. Now, thirdly, Malaysia will ensure that its position as a center of competitive trade, finance, and tech can withstand the changes around us. Acemoglu and Robinson's Nobel Prize winning work on institutions and governance reminds us that poor countries are poor because those who have power make choices that create poverty. Very much Laskian, I think. Or as Piketty would have it, capitalism causes poverty by concentrating wealth in the hands of the few. The situation becomes perverse when it draws on us that socialism is for the rich while capitalism is for the poor. It's good that the students are okay, but there are many corporate players here. So the message for both. And to my mind, while there is some truth in these platitudes, we should be wary of succumbing to gross generalizations. See? And there's a caveat here. Because I need the support of the capitalists here. I have on previous occasions spoken of the marauding Europeans in Asia's checkered colonial history, leaving behind a trail of looting and plundering of the wealth and resources of the colonies. Today, marauders may still be on the prowl though they may no longer be geographically marked out, because whether from the west or from the east, those who have power may be states, may be corporations, or even individuals of non-state actors. At the end of the day, it is up to the nations themselves, particularly developing countries, to acknowledge the broader structural challenges faced. Be that as it may, the central insight remains: nations thrive when the state is both accountable and inclusive, fostering institutions that earn, sustain, and promote public trust. On our part, the Malaysian government introduced the Madani economy framework in 2023, guided by the twin objectives of raising the ceiling through sustained economic growth and raising the floor by ensuring that this growth is shared. From industrial policy to energy transition, inclusiveness and sustainability are at the heart of Malaysia's development agenda. These efforts are already bearing fruit. A bit premature to suggest that we are successful, but it is a good beginning. With good governance, transparency, no tolerance for corruption. Malaysia recorded robust economic performance in 2024, with strong GDP growth exceeding 5%, stable inflation below 2%, and record high trade figures. The international community has taken notice, drawn to Malaysia's mature, reliable, and favorable investment climate. In the first 9 months of 2024 alone, we successfully attracted over 100 billion ringgit in approved foreign investment across manufacturing and services sector from the East and West alike. But there's certainly no time to revel in fleeting victories. In a world increasingly defined by chaos, finding order begins with our capacity to adapt to disorder. It's just like Bangkok traffic. How do you navigate with such disorder? Not as bad, but then London traffic is the same. To this end, Malaysia's deepening foray into the semiconductor industry is a testament to our forward-looking outlook. Recently, we launched our national semiconductor strategy, which earmarks game-changing incentives and investment to make Malaysia indispensable to the global semiconductor supply chain. Ultimately, as an international trading nation, the crosswinds of uncertainty call for a renewed resolve to stay adaptive and ambitious without neglecting the paramount pursuit of sustainable, inclusive, and just growth. Malaysia heeds this call as we set our sights on securing the nation's place as a vital nexus of trade and investment, as well as technological investment in an unpredictable world. Now, it is, of course, a forward-looking and holistic paradigm. Precisely because of this, we decided to join BRICS. Now, it is not, as some of the pundits would like to claim, about Malaysia's choosing a side. It is about clear-sighted recognition of the geopolitical and geo-economic changes that are happening around us and expanding our options. So, ladies and gentlemen and fellow students, historical and commercial antecedents. I said fellow students. You were smiling. Why? I remain a student. Coming here to LSE, I have to be a student. I'm not qualified to be a professor. I'm not too sure about that. But anyway, the strong, long-standing bilateral relations between Malaysia and UK is paramount. My meeting with Prime Minister Kiir, number 10, was significant and meaningful. I did say, don't worry about the first 6 months. I said to him, my 6 months as Prime Minister, after waiting for more than 2.5 decades, was a baptism of fire. Demand from the Malay racist rhetoric, religious extremist parties, demanding there should be change, no tolerance for this liberal crowd and multiracial pluralistic ideas. We survive, we are able to consolidate and focus with clarity of policies. So our collaboration with the UK is not a political statement. I'm talking about historical antecedents. From the early days of independence, and as Malaysia developed as a nation, was not without its speed bumps. However, there is no route not taken, because as Malaysia continues to chart a clear and confident course, the road that stretches out ahead for the two countries promises to be far less winding and less bumpy. I hope that we continue to build the foundation, allowing neither external forces nor the inevitable differences of views to pull us away from the larger goal drawn from our bedrock of commonalities, a peaceful, stable, and prosperous global order built on the edifice of multilateral cooperation and equity. Terima kasih.